What is going on, and welcome to the Self-Made Podcast. This is something that I've been wanting to do for a very, very long time and put it off for a very long time. But now it's finally time to do it, to get started, and I'm absolutely buzzing to do it. So this first episode is just going to be an intro, really, as to who I am, what the podcast is about, and why essentially I want to talk about these things. So first things first, who am I? If there is a chance that you're watching this or listening to it, and you've just randomly come across it and you don't actually know me. My name is Ben. I'm 27. I'm an online fitness coach, and I currently live in Dubai. I'm from Poland. I grew up in Dublin, Ireland, hence the Irish accent. And I'm going to go through some of my story today that essentially brought me to this place. So what the podcast itself is going to be about, it's going to be all about personal development. I talk a lot about training, the nutrition side of things on YouTube, Instagram, and I want this to be something a little bit different. And I feel like mindset side of things requires a little bit more time, to talk and delve into things, which is why I want to talk about building a stronger mindset, building a stronger physique, and just overall discipline to win in life. Because at the end of the day, if you are in a place right now that you are not necessarily happy with, and you want to get to a completely different stage in your life where you might want to have a better physique, a completely different life, and overall build a lot more discipline in your life, it's going to require the change in your mindset. That's what it's all about at the end of the day. That there is plans that you can follow between your training, your nutrition, and other things, but unless you get your mindset right, eventually something is going to happen for you to quit, for you to not be able to continue. So this is going to be all about delving a little bit deeper into how to prevent that from happening, and actually allowing your mindset to be one of the strongest things about you. Because once you have that down, everything else is easy, and I guarantee you that. So why I want to talk about these things, and why I believe it's important to talk about these things, is because of the times in my life, things that shaped me as a person, things that allowed me to become who I am today. And very recently I kind of sat down with myself and thought, what, I'm actually proud of who I am, and I'm not afraid to say it anymore. I feel like for a very long time I've held it in because I felt like I shouldn't say it, if that makes sense. Like, people will judge me for being proud of the life that I've built, but I genuinely am. And it's not to say that there is no progress to be made, that I've made it by any means. Absolutely not. There is so many things that I want to improve on, and so many goals that I have set out for myself, but I'm working on those things. And there is a lot of things that I've overcome over the last few years, and a lot of things happened that allowed me to actually grow in a lot of ways. And the first thing that I want to start with is kind of early childhood. And as I said, I grew up, or I was born in Poland, should we say. I've lived there up until I was about 10 years old. And in that time, I grew up with my mum. My dad was never around. I know him, I speak to him every now and again, but he was never ever part of my life. And that's something that we might touch on eventually, because I feel like, as much as when I was younger, I used to say that I don't really care, it didn't bother me, because it was something that was never in my life, it never really affected me. But now, looking back on my you could say late teens, early 20s, I feel like that was something that was really missing in my life. Pushed me to make certain mistakes. And that's, easy things that could have been avoided, if that makes sense. So that's something that we might touch on down the line. But yeah, grew up with my mum, and up until I was 12 years old. I have an older brother, I have a little brother, and then my little sister was born when I was 12. So it wasn't easy by any means, as you can imagine. Single mother, 4 kids eventually, and it was tough. We moved around a lot, went to multiple primary schools. I've moved when we were younger, up until I was about 10. We moved close to 10 times, lived in 10 different places. It was mad at times. But again, that was life for me. And then when I was about in around 8, 9, 10, something like that, without getting too specific. Eventually, my mum went to Ireland to basically try figuring out a life for us, and I was left with my nanny and granddad for 2 years, and lived with them until eventually, once everything was sorted in Ireland, I was brought over there, and that was a massive change for me. Obviously, being in around 10 years old, coming over to Ireland, having to change absolutely everything. Obviously, joining a new skill once again, and starting a life in a completely different country where I did not know any English, and within 2 weeks I was basically in school, and that was a massive learning process, and just having to learn on the spot essentially with what was going on, and rebuild the life over time, having to make friendships, everything like that. And I think the next big kind of challenge, or the next big part of my life, was when I was about 14, actually joining a Thai boxing classes, and that completely changed me, because in between that time of coming to Ireland and those couple of years, you could say the home situation not being very stable, I was causing a little bit of trouble, obviously in school. That was something that got me to actually focus on something positive for the very first time in my life. Like, I played sports all my life. I've played football, played basketball, done athletics like running, high jump, all of these different things over the years. And Thai boxing was something that, from day one, I'll never forget it, when I went to the first trial class, and my coach at the time, Collie, was showing me how to hold pads, and he kicked it, and it nearly lifted me off the floor when he kicked it. I couldn't believe it. I just fell in love. From that moment, I just fell in love with it, and I was obsessed ever since. And that time, I once I joined, I probably could count on one hand how many sessions I've missed over the next 6 years. Then I was absolutely obsessed. I was the first one in, the last one out. I just wanted to be the best I could possibly be, and that's what eventually got me into the fitness side of things. What actually allowed me to have the confidence to go to the gym. And because I remember, I'll never forget it, I got a gym membership one year and begged my mum for it, and she got it for me, and I never went once. I went to go to the gym, packed my bag, everything like that, had everything with me, and it was about 20 minutes from where we lived, 20-minute walk. Walked all the way down, and I would get to the door. I had full on membership, everything, but I would be so terrified of actually going in and just not knowing what to do, being afraid of just feeling stupid. And that's why I would just get to the door and just turn around and walk back home. And I would just do that a couple of times until I actually joined boxing. I was focused on that for about a year, and then I had a lot more confidence to actually go in and be able to train. I didn't care. It allowed me to actually carry myself in a completely different way, not in an arrogant way, but just a lot more confident. And disciplined. And obviously, over that year, learning a couple of things through the classes as well around training and everything like that, just again allowed me to come in with a lot more confidence into the gym. And yeah, that over that time, obviously being in skill training, I would often train twice a day. First thing in the morning, I would go to the gym before skill, get my session in before skill started. Sometimes I would miss a couple of classes to get to the gym, and then in the evenings I would go boxing. That's where I've kind of had my first experience of dieting, because I would have fights and I had to be a certain weight for fights. That's where I was introduced to my fitness pal and tracking calories and everything like that. I've made a lot of mistakes over that time. I knew a lot more, but that's, you know, that's the beauty of it, isn't it? You learn of your own mistakes, but it's better to learn from someone else's mistakes. And I wish I didn't waste a lot of time, let's say, training or doing certain things when it comes to nutrition. And that consumed me for years, and I absolutely loved it. The next kind of big period of my life was actually getting kicked out the house. So eventually, you know, without getting too personal about it yet, maybe I'll speak about it one day. But eventually, my mom essentially said, "Listen, you're just not welcome here at the moment," and I was asked to basically leave the house. It was a very, very, very tough time in my life, in terms of just trying to be an adult as a 19-year-old, and trying to figure everything out in terms of obviously paying rent, making sure I'm fed, and you know, working as well. And I feel like I've skipped over the work period sort of things. So we might go back to that, but that was, you know, a massive learning process for me, and it's where I started growing up a lot quicker. I started taking life a lot more seriously. But this was also a time where I've made a lot of mistakes. The biggest one was going out, drinking, drugs, and not living a very positive lifestyle. So I would work in a gym, work quite hard Monday to Friday, and then once the weekend came, I would just blow all my progress away, with and my money away, and spend it on alcohol, drugs, everything that was kind of related to that, you know, clothes, taxis, everything, you know, absolute waste of money. And unfortunately at the time I didn't have anyone around me to say, first of all, you know, what you're doing is not good for yourself. I didn't have any family around me, and you know, no one could see that I was necessarily struggling to deal with this situation that was going on in my life. And you know, now looking back, I can see that it got all the going out, all the drinking was just an outlet of all the struggle that I was kind of facing. It was an easy way to kind of switch off and not have to think about, you know, what's going on in my life, what am I doing, where's my life heading, essentially. And you know, I spent goods of nearly 3 years doing that. It was a tough time to look back on, because I feel like it was years wasted. As much as, you know, looking back at it, it's a lesson. But you know, it's one of those things where you wish you didn't have to go through that lesson to be able to come out the other end. But the biggest thing that happened in that period was actually a New Year's resolution that I've made. I believe just before COVID. And you know, at the time I was already a personal trainer for 3, I believe maybe 4 years, in around that time, and it was going okay, but it wasn't going great. And you know, I always had big ambition when it comes to being good at what I do, and you know, being able to help as many people as I possibly can. I was very passionate about what I did. I spent a lot of time doing courses, and you know, just wanting to help as many people as I possibly could. This is where I sat down, I'll never forget it, I was a bit hungover, and I said, something has to change here. I cannot live my life like this anymore. And if I do, I'm just going to be absolutely miserable. It didn't fit me who I was, and I knew that I would be extremely unhappy in life if I continued going on like this. New Year's resolution was to get in shape, and to get, not only get in shape, because I've been in good shape prior to that time, but get in great shape. And secondly, actually learn how to build a business. And that is why that year or that January, I actually joined a business mentorship, and I joined a physique coach, or I signed up with a physique coach. And those were massive investments for me at the time. Off the top of my head, the business course alone was about €1,100 a month, which is for me at the time as a 22-year-old, maybe a 23-year-old, maybe at the time. It was huge. It was absolutely massive, and I'll never forget how stressed out I was. But I just knew I needed to do something to actually change, to make a difference. This was, looking back, one of the best decisions, one of the best investments that I've ever could have made. And not that it brought the biggest returns, but it was where I actually started working on myself. This is where, personal development began for me, and actually, having my first experience with it. And it was absolutely amazing. And, a massive part of it was, yes, building a business, learning how to actually run a personal training business, how to actually grow it. But also, secondly, understanding yourself a little bit more. And because at the end of the day, as I've said, everything comes from your mindset, the place you are in life, where your head is at, and it's going to affect absolutely everything that you do. It was absolutely amazing for that. And as I said, in that time, I also joined or signed up with a physique coach, and I've got myself into the best shape of my life at the time. And I spent close to 6 months, in a diet, got myself into great shape, done a photo shoot, and that was absolutely key for me as well, because I've actually, for the first time, I've gotten so far out of my comfort zone in terms of training, nutrition, and pushed myself so hard, and I actually proved myself what I'm capable of. That is what then allowed me to take that energy and put it into my business, put it into, continuing growing out my physique and just overall progress. I started to see, how much the business was actually starting to grow, and obviously with my own physique, how people would actually notice it, and I started to connect with a lot more people who were focused on, essentially doing what I do, and it was the best thing, by far the best thing that I've ever done, because then it allowed me to see what's actually possible. And that is essentially where my mindset kind of growth or personal development came from, because I've pushed myself well outside of my comfort zone, and since then I haven't necessarily stopped. I've continued on to work on my physique, I've continued on working on my business, I've continued on working on myself, and actually building a life for myself that I was happy with. And that's why it's a massive passion of mine to actually help other people do the same for themselves, which is why I want to do this podcast. I want to talk about the mindset side of things, the physique development, the building overall a life that you are happy with. So if you've gotten this far, thank you very much for listening and watching if you're seeing this on YouTube. And I'm going to be putting out a video every single week, as I said, going through building a stronger mindset, stronger, better physique, and building a life that you are proud of. So thank you very much for listening again, and I'll see you soon.